If you don't know, I'm Callum Taylor. Today's presentation breaches a very current issue in music management, which asks the question, is it still possible to build a successful yet sustainable career for your artist? My reason for choosing the topic is that as both a musician and a manager, I feel that sustainability is not given the attention that it deserves. There are far too many examples of artists who get paraded in the spotlight and then dropped after their first album. My interest in the subject stems from my management research project, where I investigated the numbers of heritage and reformed artists performing at music festivals, which led me to ask the question, where are all the big contemporary artists? I'll start by giving you a brief outline of everything that I'm covering during the course of the presentation, just to give you a clearer idea of what it's all about. Firstly, I'll define a number of key words that are likely to pop up throughout the issue. I'll then move on to looking at what is already written about the subject of artist sustainability in the media. Following that, I'll briefly identify what we would consider a traditional artist campaign with regards to album launches, and then I will compare that to the more current artist campaign style. Next, I'll look at the impact of the X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, and the YouTube boom, and what it's had on sustainability of artists' careers that have won these competitions and rose to fame through YouTube. On the reverse side of the issue, I will look at artists who I believe have built sustainable careers, and I will identify the key factors that affect this. After that, I will bring forward the theory of Simon Sinek, the author of the book Start with the Why, How Great Leaders Inspire Action. I will address how we as managers can use this theory to our own artists' benefit in order to get the best out of them. I will begin to wrap things up by compiling a list of what I deem to be the most important factors in building a sustainable and successful career for your artist. I will then finish by concluding and opening up the floor for questions. So let's start by defining some important terms, the first of which being sustainable career. There is no official definition for the term sustainable career, so for the purpose of this presentation, I have come up with my own, which is a musical occupation for a significant period of an artist's life that is able to be maintained at a certain level with opportunities to grow and expand. The definition I will be using for heritage artist is one that I created myself for my management research project. I defined a heritage artist as a solo performer, group or band who is still recording or performing 15 years or more after the release of their debut album. The term YouTube boom is used to describe an explosion of artists who have been discovered through uploading videos onto YouTube and have then gone on to have huge numbers of hits or views, as they are more commonly known. There are a large number of artists who have showcased their own original music, but in many cases the videos of unsigned artists that are receiving the most hits are often cover versions of other artists' songs. Some great examples are Birdie's cover of Bon Iver's Skinny Love and Walk Off the Earth's cover of Gautier, Somebody That I Used to Know. The term one-hit wonder is one that I'm sure you're all familiar with. It is mostly used for an artist with only one recognised hit single. Below are a couple of examples of my personal favourites. I first decided that I would like to research further into sustainability of artists when I read a BBC article in the BBC Entertainment News website entitled Where Are the New Music Megastars? The basis of the article is that the huge resource of young singer-songwriters, the industry is increasingly relying on ageing heritage acts failing to turn this huge resource of young singer-songwriters into stars who will actually make money in the long run. The article states that there are currently more songwriters in the UK than ever before, yet all of the biggest live acts are over 40. Commenting on the nature of current artists' careers, music producer and songwriter Elliot Kennedy said, "It's incredibly short-lived. Most artists aren't surviving more than 12 months." In an article in The Guardian called How X Factor Winners Lose Out, which covers the issue of X Factor finalists' short careers, the journalist suggests that future winners of the show should ride the promotional wave for as long as possible once they get dropped. The problem is, in my eyes, is that once you've been dropped by Psycho, you're already damaged goods. So, why is all of this a problem for us as managers? The people who are ultimately responsible for the one-hit wonder culture that we live in are the record companies. Their short-sightedness means that, like the BBC said, nowadays, if you don't have a hit with your first single, you're dropped. Two of the biggest artists ever, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, didn't get top 10 hits until their third singles. In today's climate, they may never have had the chance to realise their potential. This makes you question the number of artists capable of this kind of career, but who have not been given the chance because of the industry's short-sightedness. Artists like Katy Perry, Lady Gaga and Jessie J all went top 2 with their debut singles, but if they didn't, perhaps no one in this room would have heard of them. As an artist manager, it's your responsibility to do everything in your artist's interest. If you look after them, they will look after you. As the bottom line is, if you build a successful and sustainable career for your artist, then you build one for yourself. Traditionally, there was a model with signing artists that would see a multiple album deal signed, perhaps 4. In many cases, it was expected that with at least the first album, and maybe even the second, money would be lost. But the idea was that it was a long game, and the initial loss would be recuperated as more albums were released. I've drawn a graph to try and illustrate the way in which a traditional model may have worked. In a BBC article, Bryan Adams said that he did not have a hit until his third album. Music producer Elliot Kennedy said, "Now if you think about that, that's a huge investment. Nowadays, if you don't have a hit with your first single, you're dropped." Which brings me nicely onto the current artist model. Nowadays, we are much more likely to see a model like this within major record labels. Record labels use singles to test the water because of the low investment cost. If the single is a hit, then they will go ahead with putting out a debut album. Then depending on how that does, that will determine whether they will invest in a second album. There are no chances given. If a record underperforms, the artist will be dropped. For many of you in this room, I imagine that looking at this list of male X Factor winners is likely to bring back memories, but that's exactly the problem. Because their careers have been so short-lived, they have almost all disappeared into thin air. After a #1 debut single, Matt Cardle, the winner of the 2010 show, has gone the same way as the rest of them, with his last 2 efforts placing 185 and 84 in the UK charts. It's expected that he will soon become a memory in our not-so-distant past. Thanks to a last-minute tweet from Elliot Callard last night, the inevitable appears to have happened, and he has in fact parted ways with his label. No surprises there. Now, it's certainly not all doom and gloom for the X Factor. It is important to point out the extraordinary achievements of boy band One Direction, third-place finalists in the 2011 competition, who recently made history by being the first UK group to hit a #1 in the USA with a debut album. Time will only tell if they are able to enjoy sustainable careers. But by the time there is a new X Factor win, will One Direction become old hat and begin to slide down the charts? Despite beating One Direction, girl group Little Mix are still yet to release an album to follow up their #1 single Cannonball. The question is it already too late for them? Although the majority of X Factor contestants have had a Christmas #1, it has never been one of their own original songs, which means they are not even able to really enjoy some of the perks of other one-hit wonders who have been able to live their life off the royalties. Neil Reid, who was the winner of the TV talent show Opportunity Knocks back in 1971, has advised the group to live the dream whilst it lasts. Neil sold 2.5 million copies of his album globally and still holds the record for the youngest ever chart topper at just 12 years old. In 1974, the Osmonds came along and knocked Neil off his perch, and he was subsequently dropped by his record label. Neil soon found himself touring the summer holiday camps, cabaret clubs, and performing in Panto. He said, "I must have been 30, and I was appearing in a show at the Liverpool Empire, and he knew that if I didn't get out of show business then, and get into another career, I'd never do it at all. I'd be unemployable, and who would be interested in a 35-year-old with no experience of anything relevant?" Are these 5 names on the slide all going to find themselves in situations like Neil Reid with bleak futures ahead of them? Birdie is a 16-year-old female solo artist from the UK who, when she was just 14, uploaded a video of herself performing a cover of Bon Iver's Skinny Love onto YouTube. After just a short while, her video had gathered over 6 million views, and she was soon snapped up by Atlantic Records, who offered her a 2-album deal. An official copy of Skinny Love was released in January 2011, but only placed at 17 in the UK single charts, despite the 6 million YouTube views. Her album album, which was released in the following November, had a similar reception, placing at 13. And since the debut single, her follow-ups have slipped further and further down the charts, with her most recent single reaching just 72 in the UK. Interestingly, 10 out of the 11 tracks on her album are all cover versions of the other artists' songs, which begs the question, what does she stand to make out of it? I would be surprised if Atlantic are going to fund the release of a second album based on the poor sales of her debut, which could therefore leave Birdie in a particularly uncomfortable position, but at least she has youth on her side. Radiohead are a fantastic example of a British band who have built themselves a successful and sustainable career in the music industry. I therefore felt that by identifying the key factors that could be responsible for this success and sustainability would be a good place to start. On the slide, you'll be able to see a number of terms that I feel contribute to this, and I will explore deeper into the areas that I deem most important. Starting with their loyal fan base. Radiohead have some of the most loyal fans in the world. These are the fans responsible for the endless sellout tours and 5 #1 albums. These very fans were the people who, despite being offered an album for free, still went ahead and bought in Rainbows because they felt that they wanted to financially reward the band for their efforts. Indulging their fans, Radiohead are very good at communicating with their fans, and in an interview with rockstarlab.com, Colin Greenwood from Radiohead commented, "While we were in the studio making the last few records, we would schedule last-minute webcasts and at short notice make small, spontaneous and impromptu programs where we would play our favourite records, talk to fans and play new and old songs live." These are great examples of ways to keep fans engaged. It is far more difficult to be dropped and disappear overnight when you have an army of loyal fans waiting on everything you do. Quality music. Quality control is important. In the same article with Rockstar Labs, Radiohead say just because they can release a track every day online doesn't mean they will. The fans trust them. The band have put themselves in a unique position whereby they have fans who will wait on their next release, no matter how long they leave it, within reason, of course. Variety. By varying their music, Radiohead have managed to keep a current sound despite releasing their debut album over 20 years ago. Elbow are a great and current example of a band who have built up their career slowly and steadily. The band, who have been playing together since 1990, built up their profile over time by being confident in what they produce and sticking to their guns. Since their Mercury Award-winning 4th album, The Seldom Seen Kid, the band have had great commercial success and become one of Britain's great bands. Radio plugger Liam Walsh said, "Apart from being thoroughly decent people, they are incredibly talented musicians, hard-working and resilient. Elbow are quite widely referred to as the people's band." However, the band have never had a top 10 single in the UK charts, despite having 3 top 10 albums. Simon Sinek is the author of a book entitled Start With The Why, How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. He believes that people do not buy what you do, they buy why you do it. His theory is underpinned by biological research that proves how the brain processes information. Without going into too much information, he has identified the part of the brain responsible for feelings, trust and loyalty. The diagram shown here on the slides is made up of 3 sections, the inside being why, the middle being how, and the outside being what. He says, everybody knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, but very few organisations know why they do it. Inspired organisations all think, act and communicate from the inside out. They start with the why. If we apply this theory to an artist, let's take Radiohead for example, because everyone understands them and they appear to be good at this. If they communicated like everyone else, a marketing message may sound something like, they'll start with what? What? We make and perform great rock and experimental music. How? We constantly push the boundaries of using new technology. We experiment with our sound to always stay one step ahead of other artists. We also try to shake up the way the business side of the industry works. Want to buy an album? It's okay, but it's not particularly inspiring. It disconnects you from the band in a way. According to Simon Sinek's theory, Radiohead are much more likely to communicate like this. They start with their why. Why? Everything we do, we believe in challenging the conventions of the music industry. We believe in constantly adapting what we do and thinking outside the box to keep things new. We make the music that we want to, not that someone else wants us to. How do we do that? The way we challenge the music industry and adapt what we do is by moving between genres in our music, shaking up the industry's business models, constantly push our sound forward and go against the norm. We just happen to make great music. By just turning the way we communicate round, it becomes much more inspiring. People are ready to buy into what you do, just because they believe in the same things as you. You build trust between the artist and the consumer, and this is how you gather loyal fans. Maybe this explains why they can bring out a rock album like OK Computer, but follow it up with an experimental album like Kid A, and it doesn't matter, everyone buys it anyway. Perhaps it explains why they can offer their fans an album for free, yet the level of loyalty from those fans is so high that they feel it would be wrong for the band not to be financially rewarded for their efforts. What can we as managers take from these examples? Following my research, I have put together a number of key factors which I consider hugely important when building your artist a successful and sustainable career. Start with the why. Find something that your artist believes in and distinguishes them from other artists, and think about it before every decision is made. Everything you do should be because of your artist's why. It is the most important thing to staying true to yourself and your fans. If you don't know why you were doing what you were doing, then how is a fan meant to understand you? At the end of the day, without anyone interested in your artist, you do not have a viable product. If you treat your fans with loyalty and respect, then they will treat you the same way. Make them feel as though they are special by letting and are a part of something exclusive by giving them previews, extras, and letting them into your artist's life more. Reward your fans. It is certainly easier said than done, but it's so important to think about what effect a decision could have in the long term. The majority of successful artists are people who have spent a long time crafting their art. If it doesn't feel like the opportune moment to do something, then think carefully. If there is pressure to release an album before you and the artist are entirely satisfied, then do your best not to. If you are treating your fans well, then they will wait for you and will appreciate your hard work. If you want to build a sustainable career, then releasing original music is a way to create a constant income stream that is essentially your artist's pension fund. This doesn't mean to say don't release covers, but perhaps think carefully about the nature of the covers you release to make sure they represent your original material well. If the style of music changes depending on which artist you are covering, then you are no longer an original act, and it will make it more difficult to build up a loyal fan base who believe in your artist. Stick to your guns. If your artist believes in what it's doing, then make for a healthy and happy environment. If your artist is happy, then you'll be able to get the best out of them, and especially with bands and groups, it is important that everyone can work well together. Each compromise that is made takes away part of an act's identity. The more this happens, the less they stand out from the crowd. The final and arguably most important factor to creating a successful and sustainable career is producing quality music. I say quality because the terms good or great are far too subjective. What I mean by quality is that music you release should be of a standard that you as a manager are confident in. If you do not feel that what your artist is producing is appropriate for its market, or perhaps the artist has one great song and 10 average tracks that just do the job, then either consider whether you still want to be involved with the artist, and if so, go away and try and build up a catalogue of music that sits well together. Because if you do not have a follow-up single that is nearly as strong as your first, then chances are your artist will get themselves a place on the list of one-hit wonders. So to conclude, I'm not claiming to be some sort of super manager that is able to turn any artist into a superstar, but what I feel I have done is brought to light the issues surrounding sustainability for artists. I have tried to look at some examples of artists who I believe have had their careers managed very well, and have analysed the areas that could be considered key factors for success and sustainability. Hopefully by raising some of the key factors, I will have got some music managers thinking further around the subject of sustainability and its importance to an artist and your own career. I think it will be very interesting to see the impact the lifting of the management ban on the X Factor will have on future contestants, a subject which our very own Joe Earnshaw will be talking about in tomorrow afternoon's session. Perhaps we may see a situation where artists' interests are put further forward, and we may hopefully see more sustainable careers from X Factor finalists. Thank you very much for listening.
Questions for Callum?
Yeah, just do you think sort of sustainability depends on how often artists release things? Because at the moment you've got people like Rihanna releasing stuff all the time, you know, people used to sort of take time out to write another album. She's touring and still writing new music.
So the question is sustainability in some kind of relationship with how quickly stuff is released? And Danny gives the example of Rihanna, who seems to be on tour, writing stuff and releasing stuff all of the time. And I suppose the question is that kind of level of work sustainable over the long term?
I think the point is that artists like Rihanna and Lady Gaga, who are releasing tunes all the time, they're the people who are disrupting the sustainable careers for other artists, because where other people would go away and write albums, they're making it much more difficult because people expect music, much quicker, and they won't be prepared to wait for it. But then if you look at an artist like Coldplay or Radiohead, it can be 3 years between releases, 4 years, and that's because they've got a loyal fan base who'll wait on what they do, and it's about how you treat them in between albums.
Goose?
Do you think that these heritage artists might just be, they've had like 40 years to make their career that big, and that's why they're that big, whereas other artists have only had 5 years, so maybe in 40 years' time, they'll be our heritage artists. And it's just a cycle which is in process.
So the question is, presumably the artists of today are the heritage artists of tomorrow. The heritage artists today have had 40 years to build that career and that back catalogue. Is this just a cycle? Will they be that heritage bands in the future?
No, I think that is definitely a point worth considering, but I think the problem with it is that we're seeing too many artists who aren't even getting the chance to get through to a second album. So I don't know how they can hope to make a heritage career, a long-standing career, if they're being dropped after releases, as they kind of go down the pan, and I think that's happening all too often, really.
Do you think managers should still be going towards major labels? Or, what you talked about, do you think they should be going the DIY route and not going down the majors that might drop you?
So should managers be going to major labels, or should managers be looking to the DIY route in order to help sustain careers?
I think what managers should be doing is keeping the DIY route as a way of building the artist profile, and leaving it until they're in a really good position to go to a record label where they can, come up with a contract that's on better terms for them, so they're in a much better position. Because if they spent years building up a fan base, a loyal fan base as a DIY artist, if they've got a lot of fans, then they would probably benefit from the distribution of a major record label and their marketing strategies. But they can use the DIY route to boost their profile and put them in a much better position.
Last question now.
Do you think that some artists who, say, get a higher level of DIY, so to speak, think to go back to that is to flop or is failure? When in actual fact, when you've got the internet, do you really need a major label for a distribution channel? You can look at that after yourself if you do the right networking. Do you think that artists and maybe their managers think, well, we're above that now, and that's a detriment to their success?
So the question is DIY and then a major label, is that a sort of natural progression? Is it actually a failure to go back to DIY, or is DIY sustainable actually, given that we can do our own distribution these days, if indeed we can?
I think it's something that a lot of X Factor winners have tried to do because they've been dropped after an album, and they've tried to go down the DIY route, but unfortunately because of the nature of the music, people are used to being spoon-fed by it. And with an artist that's a contemporary artist who's constantly pushed on Radio 1 and the commercial stations, if they're going down a DIY route that doesn't have the funding for the marketing, then they're not going to be able to get the same backing. And I think that's the problem, that a lot of people are going down the DIY route but no one's hearing about it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.